If I speak from
Good
here.
afternoon and a very warm welcome to this webinar being organized by Nehru Memorial Museum and Library on the subject of contextualizing Tagore, ideals of good governance as reflected in the narrative poems of Katha by Professor Chanda Chatterjee, Senior Research Fellow, ICSSR, who is affiliated to Nehru Memorial Museum and Library.
Should I begin?
We know that the British colonialism in India was based not simply on the brute force but also partly on winning over the consent of large number of Indians. A very important part of this consent that the British had won in India was that they had succeeded in convincing a large number of people that they stood for good governance as against the bad governance that Indians had given them for centuries. This was an important and integral part of the colonial narrative of Pax Britannica in India. The indigenous response to this British hegemonic discourse came out in several forms. It is not surprising, therefore, that Rabindranath Tagore also tried to construct his own indigenous response to this British hegemonic idea of providing good governance to India. As a great intellectual, writer, artist, and one of the biggest personalities of modern India, Tagore was acutely aware of how the British Empire was actually eating into the vitals of India and it had done incalculable harm to Indian society in all possible ways, especially in adversely affecting India's art, literature, culture, and even the character of our people. Therefore, one of the important tasks that Tagore undertook was to create an alternative model of good governance for which he sought his inspiration in the Indian history. He was obviously well familiar with Indian civilizational legacy, and he drew upon that civilizational legacy, rejecting many foreign influences that had been that had become dominant in India at the time from the 19th century onward. And he tried to build an alternative indigenous model of good governance, seeking legitimacy for his ideas from Upanishads, from other important books produced in Indian civilization. Today's talk by Professor Chanda Chatterjee is precisely on this subject. I do not want to anticipate the speaker. With these few words, I would like to welcome Professor Chanda Chatterjee and request her to proceed with her lecture. Thank you once again. Everybody is welcome.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Since Ravikanji has made a very good introduction, I can proceed with my talk immediately. So, let me first tell you that Tagore, his dates are given here in the paper. He was born in 1861 and he lived up to 1941. And I can give you a background of those times, the time in which he lived. So, this was the period when the rule of India was transferred from the company to the crown, and the spectre of the Sepoy Mutiny was still haunting the English rulers. And this was also the time when freedom of speech had been suppressed, and Lord Lytton had passed the Vernacular Press Act a uh, few years before in 1877. So that was a very difficult time. It was very difficult to express oneself. So the Indian stalwarts, they tried to resort to poems, essays, novels, and by means of these, they tried to formulate their alternative ideals of governance, as Ravikant ji just said. So here we will take up one book of Tagore. This is a book of narrative poems. This is called Katha. It was published in 1900. But when a book is published, you can understand that it takes a lot of time to accumulate the poems little by little. So, for paucity of time, I will take one or two prominent poems and I will try to concentrate on them. So, this was the time when the main ideals before the Indian people were the two unifications of Italy and Germany, and especially the Carbonary societies. They appeal to the Indian imagination very much. The youth of India, they tried to emulate the Carbonary and the Young Italy societies, and secret societies were formed, especially in Bengal, Maharashtra, and Bombay, especially in these regions. Uh, Many secret societies sprang up, and uh, they even gave rise to some form of terrorist activities. So, Tagore, in his Jivan Shriti, which was published in 1912, he had given some idea of his childhood when his elder brother, Jyotirindranath Thakur, he hired a small room inside a alley, inside a lane of Calcutta, and it was in a very dilapidated building, and they simply used to throng there. They used to crowd there very stillily by avoiding the eyes of their elders. And there they discussed almost nothing. It was absolutely innocent. Tagore justified himself. But even then, the thrill of it, just the thrill of gathering together in some unknown destination, avoiding the eyes of the elders as well as the eyes of the government, that was enjoyed by many people. So the youth of Bengal, they were easily attracted to these, but later they led to serious consequences. As we know that Khudiram, he attempted to kill a white man in 1908 in Muzaffarpur, and thereafter he had to become a martyr. He was hanged, and that was very pathetic. So Tagore disapproved of these stray attempts at ending British rule. He said that these poor caricatures of the Italian and the German unification, they were not very advisable things. They were not good things to do. So one more alternative that presented at this time, that was the Communist Manifesto written by Karl Marx in 1848, and in course of the middle of the 19th century, this attained wide publicity as well as popularity, and the youth of Europe, they gradually inclined towards Marxism. These ideas were caught mainly in Germany as well as Russia. In Russia, Bolshevism also began to raise its head. So some people opted for terrorism of the Carbonary Young Italy type. Some people opted for Marxism. Some people went for syndicalism, and some even became as radical as to choose out Bolshevism. So Tagore thought that these were ideas which will not be able to take root in the Indian soil. The Indian mind was neither prepared for it, nor the nor will the Indians be able to succeed against the might of the British Empire by trying a poor caricature of European ideas. So he wanted to concentrate mainly on indigenous inspirations, and he delved into the Todd's Annals and Antiquities. He read Buddhist literature translated by Rajendra Lal Mitro from Nepali literature. He accompanied his father to Amritsar, and from there, from the Hari Mandir in Amritsar, he learned about the martyrdom of the Sikh gurus, as well as the many martyrs of the Sikh religion. And he also read about Shivaji from Akbar's ballads. Akbar gathered some Maratha ballads, and he tried to develop various poems from them. So I will try to pick up some of these poems, and I will try to dwell on them, and I will try to find out what kind of ideas Tagore had been trying to formulate, what kind of ideas of good governance and kingship Tagore was trying to formulate, and what kind of relations between the ruler and the ruled, what were the expectations that the ruled could have from the ruler, from indigenous sources only, from the soil of India only. Ideas which sprang from the Indian soil, sprang from the Indian ideas of hero worship, Indian ideas of chivalry. Those were his ideals. So, first of all, I take up Guru Gobindo, and I will. There are several poems by Tagore related to Guru Gobindo in his Katha, but I will take up only one, and that was when Guru Gobindo's father, Guru Tegh Bahadur, was beheaded by Aurangzeb in Chandni Chowk. The entire Sikh community became leaderless, and Guru Gobindo was only a 6-year-old boy at that time. He was being raised in Patna Sahib, and in those days, he took time to acquire training for ruling the kingdom. He learned many Indian Shastros. He learned Sanskrit. He learned Persian, which was a ruling language in those days. And he tried to learn various ideas of governing, administration, literature from various sources. He tried to improve his training. And even when his followers approached him repeatedly, they wanted him to lead them to begin the struggle against the enemies. They wanted him to come and offer them leadership. Then he said, "No, please wait, give me time. Let me acquire more training. Let me become more conversant with the ideals of good governance." So, through this poem, Tagore suggests that a good politician, like Machiavelli's modern prince, Tagore perhaps wanted these old anecdotes to serve as examples for politicians of the modern times. And here, Tagore, in Guru Gobinda's mouth, he suggested that a politician should acquire a very good training. He should take time to learn all the related laws and rules and regulations and ideals of good administration, and only then he should jump into the fray. Just entering the conflict and then getting battered by the enemy, that was not a good thing. One should take time to acquire more learning, more sophistication, and only then one should proceed to begin one's struggle. That was the ideas inculcated in his poem Guru Gobind. And then there was a very short poem called Raj Vichar. Raj Vichar means the verdict of the king. This was a tale taken from Todd's Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan. Here, Rana Ratun Rao of Mewar, he was one day approached by a Brahmin, and the Brahmin said that in the darkness of the night, some criminal had entered his female apartments, and they tried to do mischief in the female apartments. So the Brahmin inquired from the Raja what he should do towards the criminal. And the Raja said that let the criminal be killed. Then the Brahmin went away and he did as he was told by the king. But then after some time, the king's men, they brought back the Brahmin, and the Brahmin was chained. He was brought back in chains, and they inquired from the king that what should be done with this Brahmin, because the so-called criminal was no other than the prince himself, the king's own son. So the king's men, they expected the king to be furious with the Brahmin and order the killing of the Brahmin or something. But very calmly, the king replied that the Brahmin should be released. This is a very short poem, but it surprises us to this day to look at the king, the Rana Ratan Rao's impartiality, that the king did not even hesitate to sacrifice his own sentiments for his family, his son, the one who was one of his blood. Even then, he did not hesitate. Justice stood with him above everything. He valued justice above everything, and he thought that even if it was the prince, it was always a criminal. And if we compare what is happening today everywhere, what is happening to our present day politicians, then these ideals, they simply surprise us. And then we proceed to the third story. It is called Shamanyo Khoti, which can be translated as a very insignificant loss. So this is a story that the queen of the king of Kashi, this story was found in the Buddhist literature in the Abodan Shatak. So this was translated by a Bengali gentleman called Rajendralal Mitro, and Tagore came across it. So this queen of the Kashi, she went to take a bath in the river Ganges, and she was accompanied by her other young friends. So when she came out of the Ganges during winter, they all felt very cold, and the ladies in waiting, they told her that madam, we are all feeling very cold, what to do, how to warm us up, warm ourselves up. So the queen said that there is a hut to be seen nearby, so why don't you set fire to the hut, then it will create a big fire, so we can all bask in that warmth of the fire. So very laughingly and merrily, they all set fire to the hut. And gradually, as we know, these huts, they carry the fire, and the entire village got burned. So the poor villagers, they went and approached the king of Kashi, and they reported everything. They were sobbing and saying, "Oh king, where do we go? All our belongings have been burnt, and our all residences have been burnt. So we are helpless, and what can we do?" So the king said that the king called the queen to the court, and the king immediately asked the queen that have you done all these things? Is it true that you have set fire to their huts? So the queen laughingly said, "Oh king, we spent so much money in one evening's luxury. They were merely straw huts. They were not very. They were neither palaces nor very good residences. So what if some straw huts were burnt? It's only a very insignificant thing." And she started laughing also. So the king took great offense. He said, okay, you simply go out to the streets, you start begging, and you start accumulating the money with which you can build up the huts once again. Let them be straw huts, but you should understand that how insignificant the loss actually is. Once you do it yourself, then only you will understand. Otherwise, you can never understand the significance of their losses. So, this was the uh, teaching of the poem Shamanukhuti, that once again, like the other poem Rajvichar, the same kind of teaching that the ruler should be impartial. The ruler should look after the interests of his subjects. He should look after the interests of the ruled, and there can be no other consideration intervening in between. And now we come to the fourth and the final poem. This is called Pratinidhi. Uh, in this poem, Pratinidhi, this was Tagore came across this idea from Ackworth's ballads of the Marathas. And here it is said that one day Shivaji was taking rest in the fort of Satara, and then from above the fort he could see that his Guru Ramdas, he was going about playing his ektara and singing a song and begging money from the people around. So he felt great remorse in his heart. He thought that it is my Guru, he's Ramdas, and I have such great veneration for him. And in spite of his being my Guru, I'm such a great lord of the entire kingdom. In spite of that, my Guru is going about begging in the streets. How can it be? So he came down from the roof of the fort, and he uh, asked one of his servants that I have written something in this paper, and go and take it to my Guruji and present it to him. And in that paper, Shivaji has written that, Guruji, I am laying down my entire kingdom to your feet. Please accept it. So the Guru read that piece of paper, and he was very amused. He called Shivaji, and he said, okay, then so, you have no other qualities, you can only rule. You are a ruler. So you have also given up your kingdom to me. So what good can you do? Then come, let us go begging together. What else can you do? You are of no other, you can offer no other service. You have got no other qualities. So Shivaji was so surprised. He accompanied his Guru. Guru kept on playing his ektara, and he kept on approaching various householders and for alms. And Shivaji had to accompany him because he had already given up his kingdom and he had no option but to obey his Guru. So the Guru went to all the householders, he begged for alms, and the householders were so surprised. They immediately recognized Shivaji, and they were surprised that Shivaji had come begging to their doors. Then, at the end of the day, they took a bath in the river, and then the Guru said, now my boy, beta, you can have something you can have some food. So whatever we have gathered through begging throughout the day, we will eat a little bit of it now. So Shivaji was very surprised, but he was quite taken aback also that he will have to eat those simple alms because he was a great king and he was used to great luxury, etc. But then Guru told him that now, from now onwards, you have to lead the life of a beggar. You will represent all the inhabitants of this country, and like a beggar, you will keep on serving them. You will be the representative of God serving the beggars. So, this was the ideal of Indian kingship. This was the ideal of Indian rulership, that the king should serve his subjects uh, without absolutely selflessly, without having any considerations of his own, uh, any benefit, any comfort, any self interest. He should be absolutely dedicated to the interests of his subjects. So we can see that this was also Tagore's ideal. By choosing these particular incidents from Indian history, from the pages of Indian history, in a sense, he had also expressed his preferences for these kind of ideals. His ideals of a good Indian ruler, of an ideal Indian ruler, was that he should be absolutely impartial. He should have good training in the principles of governance. He should have no self interest. No, he will not look for any benefit for himself. And we can find that these ideals were also derived from his Upanishadic teachings. The Upanishads, they taught us to give up everything. Actually, Tagore had learned of Upanishad because of his Brahmo background from Ram Mohan Rai. And Ram Mohan Rai had said that Hinduism had become submerged into uh, just paganism. Hinduism has become a lot of meaningless achars, just meaningless customs and rites. And nowadays, Hinduism cannot be recognized from simple paganism. It doesn't have any meaning at all. So these lifeless customs, these lifeless burden of the caste system, all these should be broken, and the shastras, the Indian scriptures, they should be approached uh, actually as they are in their pristine purity. So that was the ideal of Ram Mohan Roy, and Ram Mohan Roy started studying the Vedas and the Upanishads, and Tagore also from his early childhood he was taught in the Upanishads. They had to recite the Upanishad every day, and one particular theme, this Teno Takteno Bhunjitha Ma Gridha Sarvasva Dhanam, uh, this ideal that you enjoy by giving up everything. And he also referred to another theme of Upanishad, that God Himself, He has, by creating the world, He has become part of creation. And by becoming part of creation, God has given Himself up. He has not kept anything of His own. He has mingled Himself with the entire creation. And in this is His joy. This is also another uh, theme. Anandhebo Khalli Mani Bhutani Jante. Everything in this world is a creation of God. We should be happy with what He has given us and not covet for the wealth of others. These were the ancient Indian ideals, and they were carried over in Rajasthani kingship, in the ideal of the gurus of Amritsar, Harmandir, and in the ideals of the King Shivaji. And that is why Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he started the Shivaji Utsav and Ganpati Utsav to popularize these themes. And Bankim Chandra also, he picked up the stories of Rajputana to illustrate his point that struggle should be waged against the British. But those were very serious times. As I told you at the very beginning, that the Sepoy mutiny, the specter of the Sepoy mutiny was still there, and the English were becoming almost obsessed with the fear of its revival. And the Congress had just been found in 1885. And these poems Tagore had been writing immediately after the Shivaji Utsav started by Bal Gangadhar Tilak. This Shivaji Utsav was started in 1894, and Tagore wrote this poem in admiration around 1898. So, this sort of ideal, this was carried over from the days of the Upanishads, that the ruler should give up everything. He should mingle with his subjects. He should become part of his subjects. And he should not consider his interests separate from those of his subjects. He should try to identify himself with his subjects. And that was the ancient ideal. And ever since the Upanishads, it ran into our traditions and it ran into our mind. And this alternative ideal of kingship, this was put up before the world by Tagore through his writings. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Chatterjee, for your very, very insightful and fascinating lecture on the Katha literature written by the great poet Rabindranath Tagore, in which he drew upon the indigenous models of kingship to build his ideal of good governance. We are now open to questions and comments from the members of the audience.
Is there any question?
All right, we will wait. In the meantime, I have some of my own questions to ask. Professor Chatterjee, as I said at the beginning of your lecture, people from all parts of India, important leaders, writers, they tried to draw upon Indian history and civilization to challenge the British hegemonic ideas about good governance, about Pax Britannica. And certainly, in many ways, one can say that Bengal took the lead in the process, and the writers from Bengal wrote not just about drawing upon the history of Bengal, but all parts of India. Now, based on this, several questions arise. One is, uh, do we find in Tagore and other Bengali writers also as much emphasis on the history of Bengal itself, drawing upon medieval or ancient period to present the models of governance? Or do you think that they drew more upon Rajputana and Maharashtra because these models had become quite important by the 19th century? This is one. Second related question to my mind is that when we talk about these models of good governance, do you think that the Brahmo background of Rabindranath Tagore, of course, Upanishads were open to everybody, not just the Brahmos, but of course, the fact is that because Ram Mohan Roy wanted to build a certain, which I would describe the sanitized kind of Hinduism in response to the Christianity, in response to the critique of Hinduism by Christianity, and there was an emphasis on the Upanishads. So, apart from the Upanishads, did Tagore try to sort of draw his inspiration from any other Indian Hindu scriptures also? Go ahead.
Regarding your first question, whether Bengali writers, or is it only Tagore or even other Bengali writers?
Others, I'm curious about this.
Yeah. So, I have not read Bankim Chandra in his entirety, but I know that he has also written Ananda Moth based on Bengali incidents, this Phokir and Shonashi Bidroho.
Yeah, Anand Math, of course, I have read, but that's one of the exceptions.
That is related to happenings within Bengal.
I know.
And there is also another novel called Shitaram. And that is also related to incidents, Shitaram and Durgesh Nandini. These are related to what was happening within Bengal.
Do they present models of good governance?
No, but models of rebellion.
No, models of good governance. That's what I was trying to focus.
Only good governance.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to understand how they built the national imagination.
Shitaram was a sort of hero, indigenous hero. So he was a good ruler to his subjects. He was a popular ruler also. And there's Shonnashis, they also looked after the interests of the people. That was written in the background of the Chiyatturin Monantar. So that Hastings, he was trying to do his revenue experiments. And that was the background of this thing, this writing Ananda Moth. So because of these novels, they were aimed against the Muslims. They have become very controversial. Bankim Chandra has made himself very controversial. But it is my point. Those who also try to say something against this choosing Shivaji Utsav and Ganpati Utsav, I'm only to say that they probably thought that these were national heroes and they were not thinking in terms of Hindus and Muslims. Those were not the days when you could discriminate between the Hindus and the Muslims. The main adversary were the British. So thinking of the British as your main adversary, you have to prepare your literature. And because Shivaji was a national hero, because Ganapati Utsav was a very, this Ganesh Chaturthi, that was a very favorite and popular Utsav. Therefore, these festivals were chosen to rally the people. They were to bring the people together, as Gandhi's concept of Ram Raju. That was formulated not only to elevate the ideal of Ram, but Ram was a very popular figure. Everyone was familiar with his name. Everyone could understand who Ram is. So that is why maybe they took up these images. These were put up. Otherwise, they did not have any Hindutva agenda as such in those times. That means it was absolutely impossible to think of. Now we think that we are independent. Why did they not become more inclusive? Why did not they think of the minorities, how it will hurt the minorities? But at that time, the main adversary was the British. So the entire struggle was aimed against the British. And they wanted to rally as many people as possible. They wanted to bring under their banner as many people as possible. And they appealed to the most popular ideals, that was Bollywood.
Right. Thank you very much. There is an article, there is a question from a member of the audience by Payal Chandel. She wants to ask you, what are your own views on the ideas of governance given by Tagore?
Of course, I support Tagore's ideas that we should not borrow from the West. We should not caricature the West. This merely become copycats will not lead us anywhere. So even if we don't shut our eyes to modern day developments, we should try to strike a balance. We should, wherever, even if we go abroad, even if we try to learn from others, we should always stick to our roots. We should not get cut off from our roots. That is my opinion.
Thank you. Any other question?
Ma'am. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Ma'am, I am your student from Vishwabhati. I have a question. Do you think Rabindranath Tagore believe in Pan-Asianism? Is it politically or any other reason?
What is your name? Are you Arjuma?
Sujit Majhi, ma'am.
Acha, good. He never thought in terms of pan-Asianism. Actually, when he went abroad, we all know that Vishwabharati itself stands for universalism. The name Vishwabharati suggests that Tagore wanted to bring the entire world into one nest. That was his ideal, and he believed in a human race and not particularly one nationality or the other. And these ideas were formulated mainly after World War One and Two, because he was a witness to both wars, and the Second World War had been going on when he expired. So these two experiences of the two world wars, they appalled him so much that he later on began to denounce nationalism and nationality. But even then, if we read his the lectures which he presented abroad, then we will find that he always harked back to his roots. Even in his lectures in Seattle, in New York, he never deviated from his original ideas of this Tapobano and King Dilip and everything, the ideal of Bharatvarsho. He thought that India could become the leading example for the world, and India could inspire the world. In certain respects, the Indian ideals of peace, there was a lot, the world had a lot to learn. Maybe the world, maybe the Western world was much ahead in industrialization, in fighting, but then ultimately men wanted to live in peace. No, peace is the ultimate ideal of goal of human society. So for that, the world had to look to India, ultimately the indigenous ideals of India. That was his ideal. আমরা বলি না ভারত আবার জগৎ সভায় শ্রেষ্ঠ আসন লবে. India will take the foremost place in the whole world. So that was his ideal.
Thank you. Well, I think we have reached the end of this webinar. We have had a very insightful lecture and good discussion. I thank all members of the audience very much for their participation, and I also thank Professor Chanda Chatterjee for accepting our invitation and delivering this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.